Verse of the day. Today's verse of the day, I want to talk about how our intimate pursuit of relationship with the Father is necessary and is required for us becoming the very thing that Christ paid for. And how a deeper look at the fruit that we produce is evidence of exactly where it is we're rooted, where we are in our journey with God, and exactly how that has an effect on every person our life touches. And so, let's jump into it. Now, I'm going to start by stealing a quote from one of my favorite ministers, Miss Angela, who says, "Don't let doubt count you out." And that phrase will always stand out to me because the truth is that is exactly what doubt will do. It will hinder your pursuit in an effort to disable any ability that Christ paid a price to have restored in you. And that is no thing to be taken lightly. And I read recently a perspective on this that was initially seemingly aggressive, but still entirely true nonetheless. And it is in reference to Hebrews 10:22 through 24, which tells us, "Let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast to the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised, and let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works." Alright, so first, a little backstory before we go any further. So the veil in the tabernacle that served as the dividing line between man and God would not only serve as the only way of direct communicative access to the Father at that time, but would soon serve also as a direct representation of the body or the flesh of Christ. And so, when Christ finished his work on the cross, sacrificing himself for the sake of our restoration, reconciliation, and our way back to the Father, the veil, well, it tore. It tore in two, and it did so during a time of evening sacrifice. And this is entirely significant because the tearing of this veil revealed a never-before-seen view into the Holy of Holies, opening up an access to God that had never before been in any way available. Now, this reconciliation of relationship and access to the Father for the sake of restoring an identity once lost to us as His image required the most selfless and perfect example of sacrificial love that this world has ever known, made complete through Christ Jesus, which is to say that restoration and new life require sacrifice. And yes, this is wholly beautiful in and of itself, but it is also a great segue back into this direct, aggressive truth of this perspective I was just talking about. And it has to do specifically with Hebrews 10:22 that again begins with, "Let us draw near with a true heart." Now, the truth that is Christ, that was delivered up in sacrifice for our sake. And let us not forget about this part, that he was offered up in the most brutal of fashions, despite his perfection and innocence. And he did this, offering himself over from this place of willful intentionality, out of the unconditional love of his own heart for us. And so, as we offer our own lives to Christ in love and in truth, as his reflection, so too must we approach the sacrifice of our former lives and our former perspectives with the same brutal intentionality and willingness, in full knowledge of the tribulations we are sure to face for the sake of a transformation that brings life to others. And as far as Hebrews 10:22 goes, when it comes to drawing near to God with a true heart, as I see it, this is not at all a request, but instead a command for those who would call themselves believers. And not even necessarily a command for the sake of the believer, but instead for the sake of those who have yet to see the truth. That in fact, to call myself a believer in and of what Christ did for me, and then refuse to truly pursue that sacrifice and what it means for the lives of those who are meant to be touched and potentially changed by that change that should have occurred in me, is not only a display of ingratitude, but I would say is idly contemptuous of the very sacrifice that Christ made for me. And furthermore, it indicates that I have missed the point of what he paid for altogether. That not only do I simply receive redemption, reconciliation, and restoration, but the pouring out of his life for my sake should result in an overflow that outpours from my vessel into another and another and another. And so my question here at this point would be, how is it that I find myself in this place of a knowledge of Christ, enough to profess my faith verbally, but then go about denying him in how I live? And I ask this because this is potentially the most dangerous ensnarement the enemy has ever prepared for man. It is believing that I have found freedom, and yet still unwittingly I remain in bondage. Sitting captive in a cell that has a prison door swung wide open, and yet somehow still I am entirely blind to it. Well, this seems to clearly be a question of faith. And that being so, it only seems fitting that we find ourselves in Hebrews once again, specifically chapter 11, as it is known as the faith chapter. So Hebrews 11:1 tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, and the conviction of their reality. And so if faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, then I would argue that doubt is the unfounded fear of the unknown, and it's grown from a lacking of relational knowledge. And this lacking of relational knowledge can only be remedied by the light and the truth that is Christ Jesus, meant to shine into the darkest parts of who you thought you were in order to illuminate the truth of just exactly who he says you are, and then shine that truth through you for all to see and all to receive. For it is through you that Christ means to make a way also for their salvation. There is a truth that you must come to as a believer and follower of the narrow way, that you were not meant or made for your sake. And if what you produce looks like more of you looking to you and to the world instead of to him and reflecting his will, then you are missing it. And this is the point that I'm making, that the fruit of my pursuit reveals where I'm truly rooted. How I live my life will bear the evidence of what it is I am willing to die for or die to. And if I cannot even come to believe that I ought to put to death a way that seems right to me, then the death that Christ died for me will have no hope of bearing any revelation in my life lived. Knowing him is where transformation takes place, but the first steps and the open door to that place are found in dying to myself, that I practice with intention daily, so that I can put my faith in the things that I hope for, because my hope now lies in the knowledge of Christ in me. And the beauty of what is grown in this place is that what I now hope for has been fundamentally changed by the change that he has made in me, that my desires have been realigned with the mind of Christ. And all of this requires a growing trust developed through an intentional effort of pursuit of relationship with him. Now, I know I'll quote this verse all the time, and I do so often because it's short and it's straight to the point of truth. 1 John 4:8 says, "He who does not love does not know God, for God is love," which means I cannot know him and not be changed by him. Having an honest conversation with yourself about where you are actually rooted not only means a difference potentially in eternity for you, but makes all the difference of eternity in the lives of the people that you touch, because you were not meant or made to be blessed. You were meant and made to be a blessing. And so I hope this has been a blessing to you. Have a good night.